Part 7. Author's Notes and Historical Truths. I. Inspiration and Setting. The last letter of Liberty Hill draws its heartbeat from one of the most turbulent yet hopeful chapters of American history, the Reconstruction Era, 1865 to 1877. It was a time when the Civil War had ended, but the battle for America's soul had just begun. Cities burned, families torn apart, and the nation stood at a crossroads to rebuild on justice or to return to comfort. The story of Samuel, Eleanor, and James is fictional, yet every emotion they live, every struggle they face, comes from real events that unfolded across those scarred years. When I began crafting this tale, I wanted to capture the America that was not written in the textbooks, the quiet courage of forgotten people who tried to turn ideals into everyday truth. Liberty Hill itself was imagined as a composite of many real Southern towns that rose from ashes after the war. Places like Hampton, Virginia, Beaufort, South Carolina, and Tuskegee, Alabama, where freedmen, teachers, and reformers fought to make freedom more than a word. Samuel Whitfield, the dreamer who died for a map. Samuel's character was inspired by real figures who believed that equality had to be built, not merely declared. Among them were men like Thaddeus Stevens, who proposed land redistribution for freed slaves, General Rufus Saxton, who supervised freedmen's settlements in the Sea Islands, and Captain Robert Smalls, the escaped slave turned congressman who helped shape Reconstruction policy. The map that Samuel protects echoes an idea known as 40 acres and a mule, a promise briefly considered in early 1865 under General Sherman's Field Order No. 15. It proposed giving confiscated Confederate land to freed families to build their futures. In reality, that plan was tragically reversed after Lincoln's assassination, when President Andrew Johnson returned the lands to former Confederates. So Samuel's lost document then represents the America that could have been. VV. Eleanor Whitfield, the voice of conscience. Eleanor embodies the countless women, teachers, nurses, widows, who became the moral backbone of a fractured nation. She was inspired by pioneers like Clara Barton, the angel of the battlefield, Mary Peake, who taught freed slaves beneath an oak tree that became a symbol of learning, and Harriet Beecher Stowe, whose pen helped change hearts long before soldiers changed history. Eleanor's journey from grief to courage mirrored the transformation of thousands of women who stepped into public life for the first time, creating schools, aid societies, and movements that would one day bloom into suffrage. VV. James Ashford, the explorer of a new nation. James represents the restless spirit of post-war America, the surveyors, engineers, and dreamers who pushed westward seeking both redemption and discovery. His name is a nod to Henry Ashburn, a Georgia legislator who supported civil rights and was murdered for it. James's Wanderlust reflects a generation of veterans and explorers who turned trauma into purpose, mapping railroads, founding new towns, and slowly knitting the country back together through courage and cartography. The symbol on his maps, a broken chain within a laurel, was inspired by early emancipation iconography, often carved in Union memorials or printed on abolitionist banners. VI. Edwin Stanton and the Lincoln Connection. Secretary of War Edwin M. Stanton was a real and formidable figure, perhaps one of the most powerful men in Lincoln's cabinet. History remembers him as both a bureaucratic titan and a man of conscience. When Lincoln was assassinated, Stanton truly was at his bedside and uttered the famous words, Now he belongs to the ages. In this story, his role blurs the line between history and imagination, representing how even those who believed in justice could be paralyzed by the politics of survival. The night at Ford's Theater is depicted as it was, April 14th, 1865, a moment when every ideal of the nation hung in balance. VII, the legacy of Liberty Hill. By the late 1800s, real communities much like Whitfield's promise did emerge. Black-owned farms, cooperatives in towns such as Mound Bayou, Mississippi, founded by former slaves Isaiah Montgomery and Benjamin Green. These towns became living proof that self-determination could survive even when justice failed. Eleanor's fictional descendants echo the teachers, lawyers, and activists who carried that spirit forward, the quiet bridge between Reconstruction and the Civil Rights Movement nearly a century later. The final carving, "Freedom is not granted. It is drawn and redrawn until all can see themselves upon the map," captures the essence of American democracy, a constant act of redefinition, line by line, generation by generation. VIII, historical themes hidden in the story. Throughout the last letter of Liberty Hill, several real historical truths were woven into the narrative. Land as liberty. After emancipation, land ownership was the single most important measure of freedom. Without it, many freedmen were forced into sharecropping, slavery by another name. Samuel's map stands for the land that should have changed lives. Women as builders of memory. Eleanor's quiet persistence reflects how women preserved the ideals of the fallen war through education, religion, and moral leadership. The power of the written word. From Whitfield's letter to Lincoln's speeches, writing was the weapon that outlasted armies. The lost archives of the Department of War. In reality, many early Reconstruction documents did vanish, destroyed in fires or hidden during political reversals. The story imagines that one such document survived as a map of conscience. The frontier as redemption. James's westward journey symbolizes the American tendency to seek healing not through reflection, but through exploration. 8. Why this story matters now. The Golden Bachelor audience, and indeed every generation that inherits America's dream, knows what it means to look back with wonder, to ask not just what happened, but what might have been. Liberty Hill is not only a place in the past, it is the symbol of every unfinished promise, every family, every town, every life touched by hope that outlived despair. As Eleanor says in her final letter, "When men forget, remind them gently. When they remember, build again." That is the real heart of the story. Not politics, not tragedy, but remembrance. Because the truest freedom is the one we pass forward, quietly, steadfastly, through the stories we keep telling. 9. Closing note. If you walk today along the Potomac River near Georgetown, you will find a small marker dedicated to Anonymous Map, 1865. Few notice it, fewer still know what it means. But perhaps that is as it should be, for some legacies do not need fame to live. They need faith. And if the wind happens to rise from the south, carrying the faint scent of river mist and paper ink, you might just hear a whisper through the trees. Freedom is a map we keep redrawing.